Hello, I'm Robert Kelly, and today on Record All Monsters, Godzilla raids again, the Volcano Monsters disaster, and monster fights.
Let's get out of here! Out that way! Come on! Follow me! We gotta get on! You're right. What are those things? I don't know.
In November of 1954, Godzilla presented a thoughtful and complex meditation on Japan's experience of being on the receiving end of the atom bomb, an allegory in which the representation of that oppression is victim of it as well. In May of 1955, Godzilla Raids Again presented two monsters fighting among historical landmarks. In a lot of ways, Godzilla Raids Again is a kind of insignificant movie. Its storyline is derivative of the previous movie, but it takes itself just as seriously, which is unfortunate because it's not as good and it doesn't do its job quite as well. What it does do well is also its major innovation in the history of the genre, making giant monsters fight each other. In the very few movies of this kind up to now, the focus had been on single monsters rampaging in cities. King Kong had included a few famous skirmishes between Kong and other Skull Island residents, notably the T-Rex fight, but the centerpiece of the film really had been his rampage through New York City. Likewise, the Raidosaurus and Beast from 20,000 Fathoms had no contact with any other monstrous animals. The closest thing we get to another creature is the big fake sauropod skeleton in the background of a few scenes. Godzilla had innovated in part by increasing the level of destruction in the rampage to match that of the atomic bomb. Kong and the Raido had done comparatively little damage. Aside from this admittedly major story innovation, Godzilla Raids Again bears all of the hallmarks of a cheap quickie sequel. Ishiro Honda isn't directing, replaced by workman Motoyoshi Oda. The only returning actor is Takashi Shimura, in a cameo as his character from the previous film, Dr. Yamane. This isn't quite accurate. Two more actors returned, Haruo Nakajima and Katsumi Tezuka, who had taken turns in the Godzilla suit in the first movie. Both had been working as stuntmen and extras for Toho for some time, Nakajima since the late 40s, and Tezuka, who was 43 by the time this film came out, since the early 30s. According to various sources, but primarily according to Nakajima himself, he took the lead in developing how Godzilla moved after studying the movements of bears and elephants at the zoo. Apparently, special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya liked his portrayal, because he had the younger man continue as Godzilla while assigning Tezuka to the part of Godzilla's first ever opponent, Anguirus. Anguirus is one of my favorite monsters in the annals of giant monster moviedom. He has a great roar, made from distorting the sound of a saxophone, which I'll play first, and then it's manipulated into his roar. Anguirus is also a wonderfully designed monster. Based on the dinosaur family of ankylosaurs, he has a spiky outer armor, usually referred to as his carapace, that his creators originally intended to fly open like a beetle's wings. But after it was decided that they looked bad flopping around during the fight scenes, they were fastened down and together. You can still see them separate a few times during the main battle in Osaka about halfway through the film. If you're somewhat familiar with this genre but haven't seen this film, you may be surprised that the fight between Godzilla and Anguirus comes at the halfway point instead of the climax. The fight acts like Godzilla's second attack in the last movie. You may also be surprised that Godzilla flat out kills Anguirus, biting down on his neck until blood flows, then lighting him on fire with his atomic breath when his body falls into the water. The finale comes when our heroes move to another part of the country after Godzilla's fight with Anguirus. They work spotting schools of fish for a cannery, and one of them sees Godzilla allegedly walking along an ice shelf. I say allegedly because this was achieved by way of a wind-up toy that wasn't working, so it's just standing there. It's great, and I love it. Godzilla isn't killed, there's no oxygen destroyer here, but instead he's buried under mountains of ice, loosened by a daring bombing raid inspired by one of our main characters' accidental deaths, crashing his plane above Godzilla's head. It has none of the impact of Dr. Serizawa's sacrifice in the previous film. While writing this, I keep noticing that phrase, the previous film. It's kind of sad that this movie, which isn't awful, it's perfectly fine, is so overshadowed by the previous film. Godzilla was one of the most powerful movies made up to that point, with its thinly veiled atomic allegory, and one of the most thrilling, too, thanks to its startling and brilliant scenes of, as the US trailer put it, dynamic violence. Apparently, when American producer Paul Schreibman decided to import this movie in 1959, he was also worried about the shadow of the previous film. He wanted people to think they were getting a brand new monster, so he retitled it Gigantus, the Fire Monster. Swapped Godzilla and Anguirus' roars sometimes, and made a whole bunch of other just baffling choices. Initially, he and his fellow producers received permission from Toho to film new special effects sequences with the original suits, for a version that would have done away with all of the human storyline that they called the Volcano monsters, where Godzilla and Anguirus would have stood in for a plain old T-Rex and Ankylosaurus, which I can pronounce however I want because Latin is a dead language. Since this film made money in Japan, but not as much as Toho had hoped it would, it was decided that they should try to make movies about other giant monsters. So we'll leave Godzilla here, buried in ice, for the next 7 years / 9 episodes. While this movie kind of crawled along, the next one would really soar. It's Rodan. We're doing Rodan next.
As I guided my plane back home, I took a final look at the mountain of ice where Gigantus would be buried forever. Back home, a grateful nation rang out the bell of happiness and bowed their heads in homage to the men who had died to save them from this awful terror.
Hey kids, the fantastic fire monsters are coming. Mighty Gigantus crushing whole cities in its wrath. Deadly Anguirus screaming its challenge of battle to the death. They're out to destroy each other, but first they'll destroy the world. Look out for Gigantus, the fire monster.
Hello, I'm Robert Kelly, and welcome back to Record All Monsters. With me today discussing Godzilla Raids Again is my lovely wife, Courtney, who is taking a break from her duties as producer to be our special guest. Hello, Courtney. Welcome to Record All Monsters.
Hi.
So, today we watched Godzilla Raids Again.
Yes.
And I asked you to be my guest because Anguirus is your favorite Godzilla monster.
Yes.
And this was his debut.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you tell us, first of all, what you like about Anguirus?
I like Anguirus because I really like his friendship with Godzilla in the Showa era movies.
Yep.
I like that he gets beat up a lot, but he keeps on coming back. I'm a sucker for an underdog, and I like his design. He kind of looks like a lizard dog with like a hairbrush on his shell carapace. It's kind of funny because I have obsessive compulsive disorder, and something that really triggers it is trypophobia, which is like things that are holes or clustered together, and kind of like looking at something with very close together spines like that. It's sort of like exposure therapy to me, if that sounds really weird.
No. That makes sense. Now, when we met, monsters were a part of your life, but not to the extent they are now. Can you give us a little bit of your background with monsters and monster movies?
Well, my first love is Star Wars, and there are many monsters and aliens in there. I always liked the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, some of like Johnny Quest, or what was it, Birdman? So those that had the like people fighting giant creatures,
right,
that kind of thing. The Godzilla cartoon.
Did you grow up with the Godzilla cartoon at all?
I did. It was on after Johnny Quest on Cartoon Network, which we totally had.
I didn't.
I'm sorry.
And we don't anymore.
Yeah, true.
But so I know your dad has a big interest in sci-fi and stuff.
Yes. We were really big into X-Men and still are, but like when my sister and I were little, he would pull out all of his X-Men figurines and cover up their names and ask us if we remembered which ones they were, and I thought that was the best game ever as like a 6-7-year-old.
Well, we are going to play a game a little bit later that's not totally dissimilar to that.
Wow. I know you don't usually give gifts to your guests, but you did give me some pink cake from the Pindaria.
We did go to the Pindaria this morning, and we did get you some pink cake.
My favorite.
Yes, but that was unrelated to this. That was just... It
was. But it did make up a little bit for me having to watch Anguirus die. I mean, I know it was gonna happen, but damn.
So let's go ahead and talk about that. What did you think of the movie itself?
Well, the fights were really good. You could tell that the war was very fresh in a lot of the scenes as well, like in the aftermath of Anguirus and not Godzilla's fight.
Yeah, I should point out that we watched the English dub version, which was initially released as Gigantus the Fire Monster.
Gigantus, that's what it was.
Yes, in May of 1959, which makes a lot of bizarre choices. I kind of went over it in the essay. They switch the roars from time to time. They call Godzilla Gigantus.
Yeah, it was very disconcerting to have Anguirus's like saxophone roar coming from Godzilla, not Godzilla.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, he's back? No.
So, the thing you said first off the top of your head that you liked about Anguirus best was his friendship with Godzilla. That was not present here.
No. I'm looking at him very sadly.
She is. She is. But what we get the other quality of Anguirus that you have expressed to enjoying is his determination.
Yes, he doesn't give up. He's shorter than most of the monsters, which I definitely feel in my soul. But he's shorter than most of the monsters, so he has to use a lot of leverage, and I do like that, like watching in his fights.
Yeah, and we talked about it while we were watching the movie, about the camera famously being overcranked during the fight scene, some parts of the fight scene. So they're moving very quickly and very savagely in how...
It's very much like animals fight in the wild, it feels like.
Yes.
So it felt very visceral.
Yeah, and the next Godzilla movie wouldn't be for, 8 years? Mm-hmm. Yeah, 7 years? And the fighting would be very different by then.
Mm-hmm. That and after not Godzilla killed Anguirus, and it showed the destruction in the city and everyone just looking at everything that they had built their entire lives around, and it was just gone. It was so sad. Like, it's just... You know that people working on the film had seen that.
Yeah.
And it also had this element of hope because they were starting to rebuild what they had. Like, I think one of them was talking about the fishery.
Yes.
That he owned.
Yeah.
And ran.
One thing I found interesting is that they leave for Hokkaido. They leave Osaka for Hokkaido.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually saying we can't rebuild.
Yes.
Which I always found kind of strange for this movie, especially after the second one. It's like, oh, well, we'll go over here. And it also takes place over a longer period of time.
Yes.
Than the first one.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on?
They go to the Arctic.
Well, I think it's just an ice flow.
I guess.
But
we live in Texas, man. There's nothing like that here.
It's basically the Arctic.
Yes.
So we only had one returning human actor in this. Takashi Shimura, who you had a heart attack almost when you recognized him.
Yes, from Sanshiro Sugata. And he was, I believe, the detective in High and Low, which is a very good, like, Hitchcock-style kidnapping thriller that you should watch. It doesn't have any giant monsters in it, but it's very good.
One thing y'all should know about Courtney is she's a much more general film buff than I am. I know a lot about giant monster movies and horror movies and cult film, but she knows a lot about normal people movies.
Well, I'm a big cult movie fan as well.
Yes.
My favorite movie is Harold and Maude, which is a little less culty now, I guess, but it's still pretty culty. It's weird.
Yes, but my point still stands, I think, that you have a better general knowledge of film.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, that was fun to see you get excited about Shimura-san.
Yep. I was like, I know I've seen him in more things than Godzilla movies.
Because you were asking, what else is he in? I was like, Godzilla.
I'm like, no.
Well, he's also in Mothra versus Godzilla. He's
seen.
also in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster.
Yes, but I wasn't talking about Godzilla movies.
I know. So did you have any other thoughts on the movie? On the human drama?
A lot of the stuff that was like the boardroom type things was real slow for me. Like real slow.
These are some of the worst talking scenes in any Godzilla movie.
But I did like seeing the like weird cut in of the educational science, like was it an educational movie thing about
so the stock footage
evolution or something.
So the stock footage was not in the original Japanese version, which we also have, but but we wanted to watch this a little more accessibly, like the point I made in the last episode about the accessibility of film. But this we were watching the American version, Godzilla Raids Again, aka Gigantus the Fire Monster, off of the 2006 Classic Media DVD, which has a commentary by Steve Reifel and some guests, which I didn't subject you to, but I have listened to it before, and Steve Reifel points out that none of that stock footage is in the original film, and most of it's lost. Most of the sources for it are lost outside of Gigantus the Fire Monster.
Yeah, as a person who likes silent movies, I feel that.
But yeah, there's a lot of stock footage in this movie. The celebration welcoming Japan's Nazi collaborators with the swastikas poorly blurred out. During the nightclub scene, all the pointless prologue over nuclear bombs at the beginning. Not that it's not relevant to the film, but what they choose to discuss is irrelevant to the film.
I wrote 2 notes while I was doodling and watching the movie, and one of the notes was loving these derpy dinosaurs
in the stock footage.
And then the other one was, are Godzilla and Anguirus cousins? Because that's kind of what they made it sound like.
They made it sound like that, but that, again, is only in the very confusing American version. Gigantus the Anguirus and Anguirus the Anguirus and the fire monsters. And
man, that would have been so cool.
That would be neat.
That's a headcanon for me.
That's a headcanon, yeah. You could almost do like what Legendary Pictures is doing, where they're saying they're all Titanus as their genus, and then the species in particular is...
Yeah.
This one is not one of my favorites, but I watch it from time to time because the fights are good, and...
Yeah. I thought it was gonna end when Godzilla set Anguirus on fire.
No, that's another interesting thing about this one, is that the fight is in the middle, whereas, eventually the fights would be the finales of these movies. Not all the pieces are together. We're still pretty early in this history. So things are still coming together, but this was a pretty big piece of the puzzle.
My man Angie.
My man! All right. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with our game for this episode.
Woo! I already got pink cake for it.
This episode's game is called What's in a Name, and it's the Anguirus edition.
Oh.
And we'll come back to you shortly. Hello, I'm Robert Kelly, host of Record All Monsters, and this is an ad for Anchor. That's right, an ad for Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. I was super intimidated to start this podcast until I heard about Anchor. And there are a number of things that made me feel more at ease to begin. First of all, it's free. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. They distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on multiple platforms, including whatever one you're listening to. And you can make money from your podcast easily with no minimum listenership. All you do is enter your information. Anchor takes care of the rest. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. This is the mandatory call for action that I have to read out now, but it's true. You can download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I've been Robert Kelly, host of Record All Monsters, and this has been an ad for Anchor.
Here's motion picture adventure and excitement to stagger the imagination. The fantastic fire monsters raging out of the flaming bowels of hell. Mighty Gigantus crushing whole cities in its wrath. And deadly Anguirus screaming its challenge of mortal combat. The battle of the ages. Scenes and sights and sensations beyond anything the screen has ever shown.
Welcome back once again to Record All Monsters. I'm Robert Kelly, here with my special guest, producer, and wife, Courtney Meissner Kelly.
Yeah.
And now we are going to play our game for today. What's in a Name? Anguirus Edition.
Whoop.
Like we discussed in last week's game, translation is not an exact science, especially when it comes to idioms, expressions, and turns of phrase, but this is also true for names. Doubly so for made-up names, like Anguirus. It's been translated a number of different ways before Toho settled on the official version around 2006. In today's Anguirus edition of our game, What's in a Name?, I'll ask you if these translations of Anguirus were ever used in reference to the monster in English language media. If you win, you get to marry me. If you lose, you have to stay married to me. There are no prizes and penalties.
I'm okay with that.
I wrote that specifically because I knew you were going to be the guest on this one. Otherwise, this would have been really awkward if it were like Ray's episode. All right. Our first question. Has Anguirus ever been called the Anguinus?
I'm gonna say yes.
Yes, Anguirus has been called the Anguinus. He was called the Anguinus in 2004's Godzilla Final Wars.
No. Why?
I may cut in the audio at this point. We'll see. That'd be fun. That'd be funny. Okay. Our next one. Has Anguirus ever been called Anguilla?
Yes.
Yes, he has. Godzilla calls Anguirus Anguilla in Godzilla vs. Gigan when he says, "Hey, Anguilla!"
I love that movie.
That's one of my favorite ones.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Has Anguirus ever been called Anguirus?
No.
No, he has not. I have, or at least not that I could find any references to.
I figured you had to put a no in there somewhere.
Well, maybe there's more than one. There probably is more than one no. Has Anguirus ever been called Anzilla?
Yes.
Yes, he has. You're doing too good.
Yay! I promise I didn't see these.
From various books throughout the 70s, including, famously, the Crestwood House monster book Godzilla by Ian Thorne.
Your favorite.
Yes,
it's orange.
Yes, one of the fundamental texts of my childhood. It contains many other errors, including the Forey Ackerman-spawned false double ending to King Kong vs. Godzilla myth. Alright, last question. Has Anguirus ever been called Boryu?
It sounds like it doesn't go with it, so I'm gonna say yes.
Yes, this is his official nickname from Toho.
It's not Angie?
No, his official nickname is Boryu, which translates loosely to fierce dragon.
Aww, I'm fierce little Angie.
You're fierce little Angie. I should have come up with more of these, but that is the entire game. You win nothing. You lose, sir. Good day. Actually, you win because you got every question right.
Yay!
So, that's it for this episode of Record All Monsters. Courtney, do you have any social medias the people can reach you at? Perhaps your art Instagram?
Yes, I have 2 Instagrams. One is Sea Mice Run, CMEISS. So, it was based off of a literary rap name that I made up with my friend when we were drunk in college. She was Mad Hats and I was Sea Mice Run. So I kept that as my Instagram name. And I also have one that is Sea Mice Art Stuff that has my art journaling and sketches, that sort of thing. So I don't have Facebook. Sorry, not sorry. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right, and you can find us at Monsters Record on Twitter, at Monsters, or at All Monsters, or at recordallmonsters.pod on Instagram. You can find us. We have a website now, recordallmonsters.wordpress.com. Someday I'll pay them so that I can take the .wordpress out of there. But not today. You can contact us through email at recordallmonsterspod@gmail.com. And
yeah, I'm much better at answering emails since it doesn't require talking on the phone.
yes, and Courtney is helping me with the mails. So, you can contact us there. I am your host, Robert Kelly. This has been Record All Monsters. Have a good whatever time of day it is when you're finishing this, and remember that monsters are your friends and mine.